Welcome to the latest episode of EV Obsession. Of course, we are just still learning how to do these things live. We're in the early stages. I'm your host, Joe Boris, here with Clean Technica CEO Zachary Shahan. And Zoom has given us this wonderful new brick-lined office from which to do our new show. We're going to give this a try today just so we can share some visuals. And, obviously, I guess we're starting off with EV sales growing faster than forecasted. It's all right, guys. We're still week one. We're learning how to do this.
Not just getting it ready there for us to look at, but this is one of the stories we're highlighting today. Another story is the U.S. auto strike that's happening. So they're related, I think.
I think they are related. You're going to see this. There's so many moving parts to this thing too, but for those of you who have just kind of woken up to this news about the UAW strike, to understand what's happening, the United States, North American auto manufacturers, and not only the American manufacturers, but Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Volvo, they have had record profits for years. And we are talking about tens of billions of dollars. Like, Ford had a $12 billion profit last year. I think 2 years ago, going back and looking at the math, GM had like 13.9 billion. And that's after paying their CEO thousands of times what the average worker pays. And after paying all of their executives multi-million-dollar bonuses, they were still cashing in and depositing tens of billions of dollars into their accounts. And the prices of the vehicles at dealerships have gone up significantly. Even just since 2019, pre-pandemic, you've seen prices of vehicles go up an average of 30 to 38%, in some cases 50%. There are $45,000 Priuses out there. There are, $30,000, $40,000 Honda Civics, which is getting a little bit nutty. And all of this has been couched as inflation, but at the same time that all of these companies are raising prices and we're seeing news stories about inflation, you're also seeing record corporate profits. And those profits and those salaries and those bonuses are not coming with additional wages for the frontline workers, whether that's cashiers at Walmart, or in the case of the UAW, the people who are actually manufacturing these vehicles, the factory line workers. Now, you're not going to see this with the Japanese brands. You're not going to see this with the European brands that are manufacturing in the US because they are not unionized. But where the manufacturers do have union shops, UAW, they have an employment contract that says that all the employees will be treated a certain way. They'll get paid a certain amount. And specifically, their contract was expired last night. And the UAW, rather than issuing a general strike where everybody walks off, they're doing what's called targeted strikes. So about 13,000, 14,000 UAW workers at specific locations have gone on strike, and they are hitting some very profitable and popular models at these companies so that Ford, GM, and Stellantis can no longer produce these vehicles. And they're doing that effectively saying, look, we are the reason that you guys are making profits. Without us, you do not have vehicles to sell, whether they're internal combustion or electric or anything else. And the demands that they're making are, look, the price of vehicles and the profits that go along with them have risen about 30%. The dealers are making about 30% more. The company's making about 30% more. We want a share of that. We want our 30%, 38% raise as well to go along with that. They're also looking to end what is called tiered payment. What does that mean? That means that when you get hired at a UAW plant or at a factory job, you get paid a certain amount for the hours that you work and the work that you do. And then after a while, after you've been there a couple years, couple months, you get raised to a higher tier and then a higher tier until after about 5 or 6 years, you're making the maximum amount that you make in that job. That means that two people who are doing the exact same job are being paid two different amounts based on how long they've been there. In most cases, you would look at that as discriminatory. You would say, well, he's a waiter, I'm a waiter, or he's lifting 40-pound boxes and I'm lifting 40-pound boxes. We're doing the same amount of work, the same type of work. We should be paid the same. That's kind of what the UAW is asking here. But this really goes back to before the pandemic. It goes all the way back to 2008, 2009, and the original financial crisis, where the government bailed out all three automakers. I know we're going to have some comments saying, oh, Ford didn't take a bailout. Ford absolutely took a bailout. Ford took the largest bailout. They just didn't take it through Ford. They took it through their financing arm, Ford Motor Credit. So Ford Motor Credit got billions and billions and billions of dollars of their loans backed up and saved and essentially bailed out so that they could keep issuing new loans for Ford customers. This all goes back to that time, because that is when a lot of the risk of automotive manufacturing and captive financing went away. We kind of proved as a society that we were willing to privatize the benefits of running an automotive business and socialize the risk. So these companies, rather than do what was asked of them, which is generate more fuel efficient vehicles, smaller, more capable cars that could compete with Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, et cetera, what they did was double down on pickup trucks and SUVs. In many cases, stop making small economical cars altogether, especially in the case of Ford, which has only one car currently in its product lineup, which is the Ford Mustang. And this has been a push towards making more expensive, higher dollar, more profitable vehicles based on older existing technology. And instead of financing it, which they knew they could get it bailed out of, they would increase the price, increase the term of the loan, increase the rates and the amount of time, and effectively make it so that it would be easier for people to default on the loans. And we can get into all the socioeconomic version of that. But the very, very, very short version of this is car companies are making a whole lot more money and they're not paying their people a whole lot more.
Yeah, well, there was a chart in our show yesterday about this as well. But you sent me a TikTok.
I did.
I'm not on TikTok. So
that's why I had to text it to you.
Yeah, I can watch it, and then if I want to watch anything else they recommend, I have to get a TikTok account. I had one at one point, but I closed it. TikTok is a different world. I was like, it's always weird. Every TikTok thing I see pretty much is weird, and I'm like, what is this? But do you want to explain what the TikTok is? And I'm curious where it came from, because I'm sure not every TikTok user sees it. You have to have certain interests or I don't know how it got shown to you.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about these things.
Yeah, it probably came to me. It's a clip from The Righteous Gemstones, which is this great show. It's kind of a comedic show about a family of mega church pastors who are dreadful, awful people who very cynically clutch at the cash donations of their flock, right?
They make a ton of money and pretend they're doing everything selflessly, right?
They're doing everything selflessly, right? And exactly. Well, the Lord needs me to have this private helicopter to the golf course because I need to reach as many people as I can, and I can only do that with my own private helicopter. And there are people who believe that. Some of them may be listening to this right now. If that's
I don't think so.
If this is offending you in any way, you should probably consider switching the channel. But what it is Jim Farley, which I'm a big fan of Jim Farley. Oh, I can't even get it to play anymore. And he's standing in front of the Ford, and it shows that he made $12 billion, right? And he's
not actually Jim Farley.
Right. But no, it's not actually Jim Farley, but the label
says guy.
Jim Farley, right?
The label says Jim Farley.
Right. And he's just it's a guy from The Righteous Gemstones. It's actually Baby Billy, if you know the show. It's hilarious. And he's talking about, I don't make any money on this. I make nothing. It's showing the $12 billion profit Ford made. Yeah. I can't afford to pay,
in the top it says $12 billion in profits. On the bottom, Jim Farley. And he's talking about how they're just selflessly doing this and not making any money and can't afford it.
We can't afford to pay people anymore.
It took me a while to get it. I was like, what is this? But that sort of captures the situation pretty well. It's like Ford saying, we don't have money to pay you more. While, of course, Jim Farley, I'm sure, makes plenty, and Ford is making billions in profits. So it's what's the actual, what can they afford to do is sort of the question. And I think the demands that the UAW are putting forth, some of them might of course be too much, too far. Others, it's just just do it, come on.
Yeah, but it's hard to say what's too far. I mean, you have, so Ford is a public company, so we have very good access into who gets paid what. Ford CEO, Jim Farley, he was paid $21 million last year. And, based on his profits and bonuses and stock options and dividends and everything else, there's a lot more than that amount of money going to him. And there's plenty of people who will come out of the woodwork every time that you start talking about executive pay and CEO pay and talk about justifying it. And they can do that by saying, well, look at the bottom line. Before Jim Farley was there, we had, a couple of different CEOs, and some of them lost money. Some of them only made 1 or 2 billion. This guy generated $12 billion in profits for the company. So he deserves a little bit of a boost. That's fine. Good for him. But those $12 billion in profit came at the expense of other people in the company. We can make the argument as to whether or not they deserve that, whether or not people already get what they deserve, whether or not they're already paid too much. That's not the issue here. The issue is that the UAW has decided that they don't feel like they're getting their fair share of this cut. They have decided that they want to be treated differently. They have decided that they will not work rather than allow the companies to continue to make this kind of profit at what they believe to be their expense. But it's very interestingly timed. And I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist here, but I don't believe that there are no conspiracies, right? That would be an equally ridiculous thing to say. We know from CIA documents that, yeah, we tried to assassinate Castro. There was a CIA review of, what would happen if you drove a plane into a building. So there are some things that happen out there that are a little bit sus. And I think in this case, it's very interesting because we have a scenario that for the first time since 2019, we're starting to see that dealerships on the ground have excessive levels of inventory. That means that people are not buying up the vehicles the way they were in 2020, 2021, where literally stores were running out of products to sell. Dealerships did not have cars to sell. And when they did have cars, they would put ridiculous markups on them because they could, because people wanted a new vehicle, needed a new vehicle, and they would pay whatever they had to get it. And we're starting to see that reverse at the same time that this contract is up. You have an excess of Mach-E Mustangs. You have an excess of regular Mustangs, regular F-150s, Ram trucks, which don't have EVs. It's worth noting they have 300-day supply, 280-day supply of a number of Jeeps. The Jeep Renegades, I think, have 500-day supplies, which effectively means at current rate of sales, how long will it take them, the dealers of these products, the vendors of these products, to run out? So this strike is actually really well timed because car companies don't sell cars to individuals. Ford has never sold you a car. You have never bought a car from Ford. You bought a car from a Ford dealer. Ford's customers are their dealers. And right now, their dealers are telling them, we have too much inventory. We cannot mark up our products the way that we have become accustomed to in the last 3 or 4 years. We would like to continue selling a $19,995 Ford Maverick for $32,000 with a $10,000 market adjustment and a $1,000 dock fee. But we can't do that because there's too many of these vehicles available. And now we have to negotiate like the old days. So for these companies to sit back and say, you know what? You've got a good point, Mr. Dealer. Maybe we won't negotiate with the UAW. Maybe we'll artificially restrict some supply and boost up demand. We'll let you burn through your existing inventory that you've got floor planned through a bank and you're paying interest on. And then once the inventory gets back in check, everything comes back to normal. I think you'll see these companies, they'll come to the bargaining table with something passable and acceptable to everybody. But I think this union strike is being looked at by the big three as a good tool that they could use to shut things down for a month or two and let the dealers burn through some inventory so that they can start ordering and delivering again.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. So the chart from the story yesterday that I referenced was this one. This is for Europe, but it's showing massive profits last year among European automakers compared to in 2019. And just to reiterate sort of what you were saying, the US automakers similar kind of deal. And, a lot of the inflation we saw across the board in the US and globally,
inflation
was from corporations taking more profits, like jacking up their profits and blaming it on inflation. or
Right.
so.
But that is inflation. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
well, I
inflation
mean,
caused by
yes,
price
they were
gouging, but
blaming
it's
it on
still
supply
inflation.
chain and whatnot, but they were jacking up profits. So this was a major contributor to inflation. And but it's also, if in the broader context, they struggled during the COVID shutdowns, and then perhaps they're like, oh well, let's just get back, to normal. Hey, let's just go higher. Let's go more. Let's go more. Let's go more, because they're paying for it. It's kind of a case of like a kid being left in a candy store or something on their own, like with a
Yeah.
open wallet.
Well,
And
the lessons that were learned were that they could sell fewer vehicles that had more options in them and higher margins and make the same amount of profits without making as many vehicles, which effectively meant that they just trained themselves to not build inexpensive, affordable products. They would rather give you a much more expensive product at a longer term. We're starting to see now 7, 8, 10-year car loans becoming very normal in a lot of dealerships because people can't afford the monthly payments. And the manufacturers are doing this knowing that if there's a massive uptick in defaults and repossessions, they've already trained themselves. They already know from 2008, 2009 that they'll get bailed out. So they don't care.
Bailout. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, big points there. And but on the flip side, you can say, while they made those massive profits, as you're saying, the inventory's been growing, the market's been evening out, getting back to normal. And now the automakers are not necessarily at a point where they're like, oh yeah, we'll make another 12 billion next year. They can see like, oh, the market's going to calm down, so we can't negotiate based on last year's profits or whatever. But at the same time, there's just stuff, of course, a labor union is going to ask for, because they're trying to improve their wages have been stagnant for auto workers for like 2 or 3 decades. So
yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
I saw a chart on this on MSNBC. they had a chart showing the stagnant wages for auto workers for 2 or 3 decades. I forget how long, as the economy as a whole has gone up. So they're also like, hey, we should get a piece of this growing economic pie, right? What's perhaps deceiving there is like almost nobody's getting a piece of that pie, just super rich. So it's like
there's like 4 guys getting a piece.
So it's not just auto workers, like anyone in the middle class and below is like, not getting a piece of that growing economic pie. But anyway, this is what they're kind of trying to negotiate. But you have a big problem, a huge problem. And you touched on it. This is no longer the US auto making community and industry is no longer centered just in Michigan. Right. Or just
the Midwest. We'll say the Midwest.
The Midwest. In fact, practically every new model and new big factory is getting built in the Southeast.
That's right.
With almost no regulations, no labor unions, and much more cheaply. It's basically it's just like if you're outsourcing to a very low cost, low wage country in Asia, except it's the Southeast, because the US Southeast is basically like a very low cost, low wage country.
Look, if you have never driven, take a car trip. And I don't mean like, don't take the interstates, take like, the old, like the state roads, and drive through the South. We did this a couple of years ago. My wife and I decided we were going to drive the old state highways. And I got to remember what it was. It was like the Pennsylvania Army Highway, whatever, Army Highway Trail. And we took that from Ohio all the way up to Connecticut to see our mutual friend Chris Tomorrow, actually, for his wedding. We went for that. And it was a really eye-opening experience, because for every really cute small downtown that we found, like our little rural town that had a neat downtown, we drove through some of the poorest, some of the most backwater, like these are people who are subsistence farming. These are people who are, shooting possums and raccoons to make stew that night. And it really is ridiculous levels of poverty in this country that I think a lot of people, certainly myself, who had not done that kind of drive, had not seen that, would not have thought existed here. I mean, my family's from Costa Rica. I've seen poverty. I've a lot of us, a lot of people that we knew had dirt floors and slept on the ground. And that's the same kind of poverty you see in Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, parts of Western South Carolina, North Carolina. Yeah. This poverty is here. So these companies can come in offering 15, 18, 20 bucks an hour. And for the people that live there, that's an incredible amount of money. And
big boost.
Exactly. And they don't want the union to come in because they're afraid that the union is going to push these manufacturing jobs out, and they're going to be left with less than the nothing that they currently have. Or worse, they've been convinced that they have it good. Right. And it's really shocking. But
yeah, so the negotiating, the UAW doesn't have a huge negotiating lever when
not like they did, right?
When automakers can say, we'll just build in Tennessee, we'll just build in Alabama,
or China,
and perhaps sudden disruption is a problem, and they're like, this is a problem right now, obviously, but that might just push them more to say, our next factory is going to be in Western North Carolina or something. So I think it's a challenge, and at the same time there's the EV the EV revolution going on, and so this is a separate but connected issue where they have to ramp up their presence in EVs, and that costs money, and that takes investment. It takes it's gonna take a while before they're making bank on electric vehicles like they are on F-150s.
So they claim.
Yeah, but let's just, I want to get to this story for a moment, and then we'll probably come back. But so EV sales are growing faster than forecasted, a recent study found. Oil demand, the study found, peaked in 2019. And this is just sort of the chart highlighting the, what was forecasted as fast or faster EV adoption, EV growth, and what's actually happening. And you can see the blue line is going faster than even the fast and faster forecast. So basically it's all happening faster than people expected.
Siemens actually just posted this on LinkedIn, a very similar chart showing that their own predictions from 2019 were slow. Their predictions from 2021 were slow, and their predictions from 2022 were slow. And, it's really interesting because you hear a different story from Ford dealers. You hear a different story from certain news outlets. They're talking about EV demand has cratered, and we went from 3-year wait lists to now we have 27 days of inventory or 60 days of inventory. That's fair. That's a huge swing from having a wait list to having waiting inventory. But look at the Dodge Ram. Look at the Ram pickup, 300 plus days of inventory. I mean, like, you want to talk about cratered demand. Some of the Jeep models have 18-month supply. They're not going to sell the Jeeps that they have for 18 months. Jeep stopped making I believe they stopped making the Cherokee and the Renegade, and nobody noticed because there's still a year plus supply of those things. So I think you're seeing a lot of demand crater everywhere for some of these legacy products.
Yeah, and I think many Clean Technica readers will be happy to say we told you so, because we've forecasted faster EV sales adoption than any of the conventional sort of forecasters, and even the sort of more bullish forecasters were like, many readers have said, this is not bullish, this is like way below what I'm expecting. And I think we're being proven right again. There's a letter to the UAW, to the automakers from the UA in support of the UAW workers, from Center for Biological Diversity, Public Citizen, Sierra Club, and Earth Justice. And as part of that, they say, right now, President Biden's administration is poised to infuse billions to boost your company's transition to electric vehicle manufacturing and component production. As these billions in taxpayer dollars move into the auto industry, you are also undermining President Biden's promise of this money creating millions of good union jobs. So I think this is an interesting quote. It's sort of, it's highlighting the enormous amount of support the automakers are getting from the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and it's saying, you can't just bail on the unions and go to the Southeast or Mexico. You're not holding up your end of the bargain. Like, this is supposed to be supporting good union jobs. Up your ante, improve your partnership with them, improve your contracts, and help the president and Congress rebuild the middle class more, like everybody's been saying they want for decades, and everybody's been saying the U.S. needs for decades. Like, it's your time to fill in the role, to be a leader, and to help rebuild the middle class in the Midwest, where your core home. So,
but that's always been lip service, right? I mean, we've gone through now 3 different presidents have gone through this in the United States. We've had Barack Obama, we've had Donald Trump, and we've had Joe Biden. And all 3 of them have spoken to the idea and the ideals of this populistic movement of union jobs and rebuilding America and, rebuilding the Rust Belt. And they've all campaigned on this and they've all promised this. But at the end of the day, what each one of those 3 have done is enable multiple corporatist attacks on the middle class. And I'm glad you brought this up, because this goes all the way back to 2008, 2009, and the cash for clunkers. And I remember this was early days of Clean Technica and Gas 2 and all of that stuff. And we were writing about cash for clunkers and how it was going to take all of these old, polluting V8, inefficient vehicles off the road and enable people to buy Priuses and Malibu hybrids and Chevy Bolts and all of that. And what it actually did was remove an entire segment of vehicle from the access to the middle class. What do I mean by that? If you had a family that was driving around in a 10 or 11-year-old perfectly serviceable Corolla or perfectly serviceable Ford Focus, they were now incentivized through government spending, through government incentives, to trade that vehicle in on a new vehicle. And then what happened to that older vehicle, which may have had another 5 or 10 years of life left in it for a college student or for a new family or for someone who just needed reliable A to B transportation, that vehicle got crushed. That vehicle got crushed, destroyed, taken out of circulation. And what you had was tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of vehicles that would be great for young employees, great for people who are retiring, great for people who were middle class, who needed a second vehicle, and removed them, enabling the only option for, or making the only option for a number of families to go in and buy a new vehicle, because those reliable used cars, a generation of reliable used cars, were taken off the road. So the only way that people could go in there was and have reliable transportation was to buy an inexpensive car. Well, now we've eliminated the inexpensive cars. We've eliminated again these dependable, fairly well serviced vehicles that a lot of them were, and we've made it so the only option for a lot of people is now to lease. And this is not something that's a secret. If you talk, again, further with Ford 2013, they talked about the technology is moving so fast. We're not interested in selling cars. What we want is to bring people in to lease our vehicles, get brought into that Ford Direct, Ford ecosystem, or GM ecosystem, or Toyota, Tesla ecosystem. And in the same way that it's difficult to switch from Apple to Android because you have all your purchases on iTunes, you have all of your apps, all of your media, we want to do that same thing. And they talk very openly about transitioning to effectively mobility as a service, a subscription model where you never own anything and you're constantly paying to the companies so that they make maximum dollars. You're seeing it again with BMW and Mercedes-Benz making some features on the car mandatory to buy. In other words, you have to buy a Mercedes with four-wheel steering. You have to buy a Mercedes or a BMW with heated seats, but you don't get to use those things unless you subscribe to the heated seats and pay that $59 a year for heated seats. It's really...
Yeah, this is the one that's been in the news, right? The heated seat subscription. Is this?
Yeah.
Can you explain what the story is with that? BMW?
Oh, absolutely. So BMW is not the only one. BMW got called out because they were considered the most offensive, right? But what this is that manufacturers have realized, and Tesla was the one who proved this, was that...
So sort of was a bit early. I mean, sort of leading the way a bit on subscription. I mean, right? I mean, when the Model 3 came out, you could get a $10 a month subscription for in-car Wi-Fi all the time, and
yes,
the all-terrain maps, and real-time traffic, and
General
also
Motors had
the
that
music,
since
the
the 90s.
infotainment systems.
Exactly. General Motors had that in the 90s with OnStar. So like that wasn't it. What it was that Tesla pioneered was the software locked battery, where you were buying the same battery as a more expensive Tesla, but it was software locked to not give you those features unless you paid extra for those features. Similarly, every Tesla has everything it needs to do full self-driving, but you have to pay extra to enable those features. And this is a concept that to a lot of older people is very weird, because when you bought a car in the past, it either had power windows or it didn't. It either had a 6-disc CD changer or it didn't, right? And there was never a situation where you bought a car that had a CD changer in the back, but it wouldn't work unless you paid an extra $59 a month.
Yeah. And with the heated seats, I think that, I mean, with any of these, you can get irritated, and people have, and people did with Tesla. Tesla fans did as well. Yes. They were like, a lot of people didn't like it. Others were like, well, this is business, you know. But
yeah, if you don't like it, don't buy the product. Exactly right.
Yeah. The heated seats one is just like, you're telling me my car has heated seats, but you're not going to let me use them. Like, it just seems like offensive, doesn't it? It's like
offensive.
Like,
it is offensive.
This is a basic comfort thing. I already paid for these seats. I'm sitting on them. Yes. Why don't you just let me heat my butt? You know, it's like, so
but that's the key. That's the key. You just said it. I paid for it.
Yeah.
Why can't I have it? And the answer, and this goes back to right to work. These are all,
we're not making profits. We're not making enough money.
No, but this goes back to this idea. Exactly. This goes back to the idea of right to work. And you know, Steve Hanley writes a ton about this. Right to repair, rather, not right to work, right to repair.
Yeah, right to
Who owns the product? You paid for it. Do you own it? And the answer in most cases is no. You don't own the software that runs your BMW. You don't own the software that runs your Ford. If they decide to stop supporting that software, they decide, you know, you're done. And this is something that's been coming a long way. I actually, back in 2009, 2010, I worked with a group of guys called Solaris. They changed the name of the company to Cyvex. And we were working on an open source ECM controller that you could drop in to an existing Bosch system or an existing Siemens ECU system and plug it in with open source software to run all the functions of the car, to run the fuel injectors, run the transmission, specifically because of this issue. And I think we were way too early on that. I think a lot of people still don't understand that this is an issue, and they're thinking in terms of like jailbreaking the phone. But we are coming very quickly to a time where you're not going to own your car. You're going to subscribe to your car. And, we already have a scenario where
Ford, at the same time, you've advocated leasing as someone who's been in the industry for
100%. These are two different things.
Basically the same thing.
It's not, because here's the issue.
Okay. Because at the end of the lease, you can buy the car if you want, but at the end.
Well, not anymore. Not at Tesla, because Tesla removed that. And I would say now don't ever lease from them, because you now don't get the vehicle back. I would say this, and I hear this argument all the time. They're like, well, you're a fairly successful guy. Your wife is successful. You guys are doing okay. If you're really this super liberal guy, why do you have anything? How come you don't just give away all your money? That's not the issue. This is like family game night where you have 4 people in a family and 3 of them want to play Monopoly and you want to play Sorry. That doesn't mean that you throw up your hands and flip the table and go, nobody wants to play Sorry. F you, I'm out. You guys all wanted to play capitalism. I'm going to play capitalism. I'm going to be an active participant, and I'm going to do my best to win. Just because I don't want to play capitalism does not mean that I can't play capitalism. You know what I'm saying? So 100%, we live in a capitalistic society. We engage with these companies in a way that is 100% loaded to their benefit. The consumer is oftentimes, in ways that they don't even understand, monetized and productized by these companies. And whether that's biometric data, whether that is our communications data, whether that's marketing data, our information is being sold by these automotive companies to marketers, to other people. And all of that is happening in the background. Yeah, absolutely. That's happening. Do I like it? No. But since that's the system we live in, the best way to do it in most cases is to lease it. because you're not going to own it anyway.
We've jumped all over the place with these few initial
I know,
stories.
and I got to go because I got to record a podcast for Clean Tech Talk.
Yeah, you have right now or 5 more minutes?
Oh, I have like 1 more minute, so go quick.
Well, this was the last story you introduced, which
this is so
I think
huge.
we'll skip for now. But
but it's so big.
You have a minute, so let's.
Yeah, I have to. For this, I have to. Look, all of these robo-taxis, including and especially the robo-taxi that was shown in the new Elon Musk biography, that little Coopy looking thing, they have a big problem in that they are, in some interpretations, they can be seen as very ableist. If you are in a wheelchair, if you have some mobility impairments, you have a bad hip or something, getting in and out of these is difficult. And getting in and out of the little coupe that was proposed as the robo-taxi is darn near impossible, certainly with a wheelchair. So while there are a ton of reasons to believe that this will improve mobility and freedom of movement for kids, for young adults, for people with vision impairments, for elderly, there is a whole subset of people who are living with other disabilities that are being effectively kicked out of the robo-taxi revolution. And it's going to be a tough sell. And I think that fundamentally, when you open up opportunities and you build ramps and things like that, you're going to kind of leave somebody out. And it's really important to try to be inclusive of everybody. So Cruise rolling out these modified vehicles that can accept wheelchairs is such a huge and welcome innovation. I can't say enough positive things about it. And I hope to continue to see more accessible ways to get around town.
So instead of just these tiny Chevy Bolt EVs, so even a
minivan, even a Chrysler,
like this could be difficult for various people to get into. But yeah, I mean, so wheelchair.
I have hit my head getting in and out of the new Prius every time I've gotten in that car. Yeah. And like, if I get in without hitting my head, I hit my head on the way out. And I've had the car for 4 days, and I'm like,
this is a good step forward. And it's also just a sign that Cruise is continuing to expand, continuing to grow and evolve. And I think there's a lot more to see in the coming years from what Cruise and Waymo are able to do with their system. But yeah, that's the show. We covered a lot of sort of non-EV UAW labor.
That's the biggest news story in the country right now. Tomorrow we'll get back to EVs.
Yeah, but it was hopefully worthwhile and interesting. Thank you.
Cheers. Let us know what you think of the